Throughout history, the Bible has been a source of faith, guidance, and tradition for millions of people. But hidden among its sacred pages are moments that leave readers scratching their heads. These are not just symbolic stories or parables. They are accounts filled with strange happenings, divine messages, and mystical objects. When read with fresh eyes, they sound more like scenes from a fantasy novel than a religious text. But they are very much a part of the Bible. In this section, we will explore some of the most bizarre moments where humans interacted directly with the divine in ways that defy logic, science, and everything we understand about reality. Let us begin with a story that is not often mentioned in churches or Sunday schools. In the Old Testament, there are two mysterious items called the Urim and Thummim. These were sacred stones carried by the high priest of Israel inside a special chest plate worn close to his heart. People used these stones to ask questions directly to God. Imagine that for a moment. Instead of praying and waiting for an answer, the priest would use these objects and receive a clear reply. According to the Bible, King David used them several times, especially when he was in danger. One story tells us how David asked God if he should go to battle or retreat. The answer came through these stones. While nobody knows exactly how they worked, some believe the stones would light up or change color to give a yes or no answer. This practice is not only mysterious, but shows a very different kind of communication with God than what most people experience today. Another story that fits into this category comes from the Book of Numbers. It features a prophet named Balaam who is traveling on a donkey. What happens next sounds like something out of a children's fairy tale. As Balaam and his donkey are walking down a path, an angel with a sword appears in front of them. But only the donkey can see it. The donkey tries to avoid the angel by stepping off the path and later presses against a wall, crushing Balaam's foot. Balaam, not seeing the angel, gets angry and beats the donkey. Then something truly shocking happens. The donkey speaks. Not in animal sounds or gestures. It speaks in full human language. It asks Balaam why he is hitting it. Even more surprising, Balaam answers the donkey without acting surprised that his animal is speaking. This strange moment becomes even more intense when God finally opens Balaam's eyes to see the angel. The idea of a talking animal may remind people of legends or myths, but here it is, written in a sacred religious text, taken seriously by many generations of believers. Then there is the story of handwriting on the wall. It takes place during a wild party held by King Belshazzar of Babylon. In the middle of this celebration, the king decides to drink from sacred cups taken from the Jewish temple in Jerusalem. These were holy items that were never meant to be used for parties or casual drinking. As the party continues, something terrifying happens. A human hand appears out of thin air and begins to write words on the palace wall. No body, just a hand. The words are not in any common language and nobody can read them. The king is so scared that his legs shake and he almost collapses. He calls all the wise men and magicians, but none of them can explain the message. Finally, a prophet named Daniel is called. He reads the words and says they are a message from God, warning the king that his kingdom will fall and his life will soon end. That very night, the prophecy comes true. The king dies, and a new ruler takes his place. This scene has become famous in culture and language. Even today, people say, "The writing is on the wall," when they talk about something bad that is sure to happen. But very few people remember where that phrase originally came from. A supernatural event involving a ghostly hand and a royal warning. Sometimes it is not the message, but the form of the messenger that makes the story so strange. In the book of Ezekiel, a prophet has a vision that sounds more like a science fiction movie than a religious experience. He sees 4 living creatures, each with 4 faces. One face is human, the others are a lion, an ox, and an eagle. These creatures have wings and move in all directions without turning. Beside them are huge wheels that also move in every direction. The rims of these wheels are covered with eyes. Every part of this scene is bizarre, full of movement, light, and symbols that many scholars still struggle to explain. Some believe this vision represents God's power and ability to see everything at once. Others think it might be symbolic or even a dream. But one thing is certain: it is one of the most detailed and confusing visions in all of Scripture. We also see another unusual case in the story of Moses. After spending a long time on a mountain, speaking with God and receiving commandments, Moses asks to see God's face. God refuses, saying that no human can see his face and survive. But he offers a compromise. God says he will pass by Moses, cover his eyes with his hand, and then allow Moses to see his back. What does that mean? Can God have a back or a hand? Is this just symbolic language, or did something physical actually happen? The Bible does not explain. What it gives us is a mysterious moment where a human being comes closer than anyone else in history to seeing the divine, yet still not fully. This scene has been studied and debated for centuries. It tells us how close Moses was to God, but also how far humans still are from fully understanding or even surviving the full presence of God. These supernatural stories show us a side of the Bible that is rarely discussed. They go beyond simple lessons or moral teachings. They challenge our understanding of reality, time, and the boundaries between heaven and earth. They remind us that for those who lived in these ancient times, the world was filled with signs, visions, and direct messages from the divine. Whether one believes in the literal truth of these stories or sees them as symbolic, they remain powerful and deeply mysterious. They invite us to ask questions, to wonder, and to explore a side of faith that is full of awe and uncertainty. The Bible is known not only for stories of faith and miracles, but also for its long list of rules and instructions. Some of these make sense even today, like the command to treat others with kindness, to be honest, and to avoid violence. But others seem confusing or even strange to modern readers. These rules, given mostly in the Old Testament, reflect the culture, beliefs, and practices of ancient times. Still, they remain part of sacred scripture. In this section, we will explore some of the most unusual laws and commands from the Bible, the kind that make people pause and wonder what life must have been like thousands of years ago. One of the most curious laws appears multiple times in the Old Testament: the command not to boil a young goat in its mother's milk. This rule is very specific and not explained in detail. Why would God tell people not to do this? Over time, scholars and religious leaders have offered different ideas. Some believe this was a pagan cooking practice used in rituals by neighboring cultures, especially related to fertility or magical ceremonies. The Israelites may have been told not to follow these customs as a way to stay separate and faithful to their own beliefs. Others think the law was about compassion and respect for life. Boiling a baby animal in the milk of the very mother that gave it life was seen as deeply insensitive. It mixed life and death in a cruel way. Whatever the reason, this rule became a key part of Jewish dietary laws. Over time, it led to the larger idea that meat and dairy should not be eaten together, a rule still followed by many religious Jews today. Another command that sounds very strange today is the rule about what clothes people should wear. In the book of Deuteronomy, people are told not to wear clothes made of two different types of material. This might seem harmless to modern people, who often wear cotton mixed with polyester or other fabric blends. But at that time, the rule was likely about keeping things pure and separate. It was part of a larger system of rules that set the Israelites apart from other nations. Some scholars think it was symbolic, a way to teach people to avoid mixing what should stay apart, like good and evil or truth and lies. These clothing laws also connected to ideas of holiness. If even what people wore had to be pure, it reminded them to keep their hearts and actions pure as well. There are also laws about farming that sound unusual. For example, people were told not to plant two different types of seeds in the same field. Like the clothing rule, this may have been about separation and order, but some experts think it also had practical reasons. Mixing seeds could damage the harvest or make it harder to grow strong crops. Still, the religious message was clear. God cared about every part of life, even how people planted their food. This kind of attention to detail is seen again in the rule about letting the land rest every seventh year. Farmers were told not to plant anything during that year. It was called a Sabbath year. This was a time to trust God to provide and to give the land a chance to recover. In today's farming methods, letting soil rest is known as crop rotation and is used to keep land healthy. So what may have seemed strange then now makes some sense. Another surprising command is found in the story of a man who was caught picking up sticks on the Sabbath. The Sabbath was a holy day of rest, and people were not allowed to work. Picking up sticks might not sound like hard labor, but it was considered work. The man was brought to Moses, who asked God what to do. The answer was clear and harsh. The man must be put to death. This story shocks many readers. It shows how seriously people were expected to obey the laws. Even a small act could lead to a severe punishment. Some say this was meant to teach people that obedience mattered more than personal judgment. Others feel it shows how different ancient life was, where rules had to be strict to build a strong community under one God. Another difficult law to understand is about stoning. In ancient Israel, stoning was a legal way to punish serious crimes. These included murder, adultery, idolatry, and blasphemy. The law said the whole community had to take part in the punishment. This was supposed to show that evil should be removed from the group. But it also raises many questions. Could people really be sure someone was guilty? What if they were wrong? These questions are part of why such punishments no longer exist in most societies today. Yet in Bible times, people believed that following God's law was more important than anything else. The harshness of the punishment was meant to show the seriousness of the sin. There are also laws that seem more unusual than harsh. In the book of Leviticus, people are told not to eat animals that do not have both split hooves and chew their food again, like pigs and rabbits. These animals were seen as unclean. People were also not allowed to eat shellfish or fish without fins and scales. These food rules were part of keeping holy and separate from other nations. Many people today still follow these dietary laws for religious reasons, but the reasons behind them are still debated. Some say they were about health. Others believe they were about identity, to keep the people of God different from everyone else. Even rules about appearance show up in the Bible. Men were told not to shave the sides of their heads or trim their beards in certain ways. This may have been a way to avoid looking like priests from other religions who shaved their heads as part of their rituals. By keeping a certain look, the people of Israel were reminded that they belonged to a different kind of God, one who cared not just about worship, but about daily life and even appearance. Perhaps the most debated law is the one that says a woman must marry her rapist if he pays a fine to her father. This rule, found in the book of Deuteronomy, deeply troubles modern readers. In ancient times, a woman's future often depended on her marriage. If she was not a virgin, she might not be able to find a husband and could be left with no support. Some scholars say the rule was meant to protect the woman by making the man take responsibility. But others strongly disagree and say the rule was unfair and harmful. What is clear is that this law shows how very different ancient values and social structures were from those we have today. All these strange laws share one thing in common. They were meant to shape a community that was set apart. The people of Israel were told to live differently from everyone around them. These rules covered food, clothes, farming, work, worship, and even family life. Some may have had practical reasons, others were likely symbolic. But together, they formed a system that reminded people of their identity and their relationship with God. Today, many of these laws are no longer followed by most believers. Some see them as outdated or meant only for a specific time and place. Others still find meaning in them, either as cultural history or spiritual discipline. But even if the rules no longer apply, they still offer a window into a world where every action, no matter how small, was connected to faith. They show us how people once understood holiness, not as something only found in temples or during prayer, but as something woven into daily life. While the Bible includes well-known names like Moses, David, Mary, and Jesus, it also contains figures who seem to appear from nowhere. These people do not have much background, yet they play important roles in major stories. Some of them speak for God, others show great wisdom, and a few simply arrive and disappear without explanation. For centuries, readers have asked the same questions. Who are these people? Where did they come from? Are they human, angelic, or something else entirely? In this section, we will explore some of the most mysterious individuals in the Bible, characters that still puzzle readers today. One of the most curious figures in the Bible is a man named Melchizedek. He appears briefly in the book of Genesis when Abraham returns from a battle. Melchizedek is described as both a king and a priest. He brings out bread and wine and blesses Abraham in the name of God Most High. Abraham gives him a tenth of everything he has, something normally done to honor a priest or religious leader. But then, Melchizedek disappears from the story. He is not mentioned again until many books later in the New Testament, where the writer of Hebrews describes him as having no father, no mother, no family line, and no beginning or end. He is even said to resemble the Son of God. This description has led many to wonder, was Melchizedek a human, an angel, or some early appearance of Christ? There is no clear answer. His name means King of Righteousness, and his title, King of Salem, can be translated as King of Peace. These titles add to the mystery. Some religious thinkers believe he was a symbol, not a real person. Others believe he was a real man chosen by God for a special purpose. But no matter the theory, Melchizedek remains one of the most unusual people in the Bible. Another strange character appears in the book of Job. Job is a man who suffers greatly, losing his health, wealth, and family. He questions God, and in the end, God answers him from a whirlwind. But before that moment, another figure named Elihu shows up. Elihu is not mentioned at the beginning of the story with Job's 3 friends. He suddenly appears in the middle of the book, gives a long speech full of wisdom, and then disappears again. God does not respond to him directly, nor is he judged like the other friends. Scholars have debated for years why Elihu appears and what role he plays. Some think he speaks for God. Others believe he represents a younger generation, one that sees things differently. Still, his sudden entrance and exit make him stand out as a strange and unexplained part of the story. Then there is Enoch, a man mentioned only a few times in the Bible but remembered for something very strange. The book of Genesis tells us that Enoch walked with God and then was no more because God took him away. What does that mean? Most people in the Bible are said to die and be buried, but not Enoch. He simply disappears. Later texts, like the book of Hebrews, say that Enoch did not experience death. This has led to many ideas. Some believe he was taken straight to heaven without dying. Others think he was chosen for a special task in another realm. Ancient Jewish texts outside the Bible, like the book of Enoch, describe him traveling through heaven and learning secrets from angels. These books are not included in most versions of the Bible, but they show how mysterious his story became over time. Elijah is another prophet with an unusual ending. He performed many miracles, including calling down fire from heaven and raising the dead. But what really makes his story strange is how it ends. Instead of dying, Elijah is taken up into heaven by a whirlwind, with a chariot and horses of fire. His student, Elisha, sees it happen and receives his teacher's power. Like Enoch, Elijah never dies in the usual way. This has led many to believe he will return in the future. In fact, some Jewish traditions still leave an empty chair at the Passover meal for Elijah in case he comes back. In the New Testament, some people thought John the Baptist might be Elijah returned. And during the transfiguration of Jesus, Elijah appears alongside Moses. This makes him one of the few people in the Bible to be seen both in life and after being taken to heaven, without ever having a recorded death. One more strange figure is the man who wrestles with Jacob in the book of Genesis. The story says Jacob was alone at night when a man came and wrestled with him until morning. As they struggled, the man touched Jacob's hip and hurt him. But Jacob refused to let go unless the man blessed him. In the end, the man gives Jacob a new name, Israel, and disappears. Jacob later says he saw God face to face and survived. So who was this man? Was he an angel? Was he God himself? The Bible does not say clearly. Some think this story shows Jacob wrestling with his faith or with his own past. Others see it as a real encounter with a divine being. What makes it even stranger is that Jacob is remembered not just for his faith, but for literally wrestling with God and refusing to give up. Another character surrounded by mystery is the angel of the Lord. This figure appears many times in the Old Testament. Sometimes he speaks like an angel, delivering messages from God. But other times, he speaks as if he is God himself. For example, when the angel of the Lord appears to Moses in the burning bush, he first says he is a messenger. But then he says, "I am the God of your father." This back and forth between speaking as God and as a messenger makes it hard to understand who he really is. Some believe he is a special angel, higher than the others. Others think he might be God, appearing in a form that people could see. Still, others believe he is a symbol of God's presence in moments when people needed clear direction or rescue. Even in the New Testament, we meet characters whose stories are left open. One example is the wise men who visit Jesus after his birth. The Bible never says how many there were, only that they brought 3 gifts: gold, frankincense, and myrrh. These men come from the east, guided by a star. They worship Jesus and then leave, never seen again. Who were they? Kings, scholars, astrologers? The Bible calls them magi, a word that may refer to priests or star watchers from Persia. Their sudden appearance and deep knowledge of signs make them mysterious guests in the story of Jesus' birth. These characters, Melchizedek, Elihu, Enoch, Elijah, Jacob's opponent, the angel of the Lord, and the wise men, all have one thing in common. They do not fit neatly into the stories around them. They raise more questions than answers, and perhaps that is the point. The Bible is not just a book of clear instructions and simple stories. It is also a book of mysteries. These unexplained figures remind us that there is always more to discover, more to ask, and more to learn. They challenge our understanding of who God uses and how divine messages are shared. In a world where people often look for certainty, these stories invite curiosity and wonder. In many parts of the Bible, God does not speak with a loud voice or through physical actions. Instead, he uses visions and dreams to send powerful messages. These dreams are not always clear or simple. They often contain strange symbols, animals, or actions that seem confusing at first. But they are full of meaning. The people who received these visions were usually prophets, individuals chosen to share God's messages with others. Sometimes these dreams were warnings, and other times they were full of hope. In this section, we will explore some of the most unusual and symbolic visions found in the Bible, focusing on the deep mystery they bring. One of the most famous visions in the Bible comes from the prophet Ezekiel. In the first chapter of his book, he describes something beyond human understanding. Ezekiel sees a whirlwind, a bright fire, and 4 living creatures. Each creature has 4 faces, one of a man, one of a lion, one of an ox, and one of an eagle. These beings also have wings and human hands under those wings. But the most shocking part comes next. Beside each creature is a wheel. These wheels are like intersecting circles, able to move in any direction without turning. The rims of the wheels are covered with eyes, not just a few, but many eyes all around. The creatures move wherever the spirit goes, and the wheels move with them. This vision is difficult to picture, even with imagination. It has inspired artists, theologians, and scholars for centuries. Many believe the creatures represent God's angels or spiritual beings, and the wheels show that God sees everything and can move anywhere. The eyes might symbolize knowledge, while the strange movement shows God is not limited by space or time. But even with these ideas, the full meaning of Ezekiel's vision remains a mystery. Another important vision is found in the book of Daniel. Daniel was taken to Babylon during the exile and became known for his wisdom and ability to interpret dreams. One night, King Belshazzar has a dream about 4 great beasts. Each beast is different. One is like a lion with eagle's wings. Another is like a bear. The third is like a leopard with 4 wings and 4 heads. The 4th beast is unlike any other, terrifying and powerful, with iron teeth and 10 horns. These beasts rise from the sea and seem to rule the earth. But in the end, God judges them and gives the kingdom to a figure called the Son of Man. Daniel explains that the beasts represent kingdoms or empires that will rise and fall. The message is that no matter how strong human power becomes, God's rule is greater. The dream is strange and full of fear, but also brings hope. The image of the Son of Man would later become very important in the New Testament, especially in the teachings of Jesus. The book of Revelation is also filled with symbolic visions, many of which are difficult to understand. One well-known vision is the one about the 4 horsemen. In this dream, the writer John sees a scroll with 7 seals. As each seal is opened, something happens. The first 4 seals release 4 riders on horses. The first rides a white horse and carries a bow. The second rides a red horse and brings war. The third rides a black horse and brings famine. The 4th rides a pale horse, and his name is Death. These horsemen bring judgment and disaster on the earth. The vision is full of fear and tension. But it is not just about destruction. It also teaches about the results of human sin and the importance of turning back to God. The horsemen have become powerful symbols in culture, showing how deeply this vision has affected people over time. Another powerful scene in Revelation is the image of a woman clothed with the sun. She has the moon under her feet and a crown of 12 stars. She is pregnant and cries out in pain. Then a red dragon with 7 heads appears and tries to destroy her child. But the child is saved, and the woman escapes into the wilderness. This dramatic picture is often seen as a symbol of God's people, the coming of the Messiah, and the battle between good and evil. The dragon is thought to represent Satan, who tries to stop God's plan. The woman's escape shows that God protects his people, even in times of great danger. Dreams also play a major role in the story of Joseph, both in the Old and New Testaments. In the book of Genesis, young Joseph has dreams that his brothers will bow down to him. These dreams make his brothers angry, and they sell him into slavery. But later, Joseph is able to interpret dreams for Pharaoh, the king of Egypt. One dream shows 7 fat cows being eaten by 7 thin cows, and another dream shows healthy grain being swallowed by thin grain. Joseph explains that these dreams mean 7 years of plenty will be followed by 7 years of famine. Thanks to this message, Pharaoh prepares for the famine, and Egypt survives. Joseph becomes a leader, and his dreams come true. This story shows how dreams can be warnings and how listening to them can save lives. In the New Testament, another Joseph, the husband of Mary, also receives messages in dreams. In one dream, an angel tells him not to be afraid to take Mary as his wife, even though she is expecting a child. In another dream, he is warned to escape to Egypt to protect the baby Jesus from danger. These dreams guide Joseph and help him make the right decisions. They show how God can use dreams to lead people quietly but clearly. Visions are not always grand or full of symbols. Sometimes they come in simple ways. The prophet Samuel hears God calling him at night while he is still a child. He thinks it is his teacher, Eli, calling him. But after a few times, Eli realizes it is the voice of God. He tells Samuel to answer, and from that moment on, Samuel becomes a prophet. This story reminds us that visions and dreams are not only for the powerful or the old. They can happen to anyone, even a child. These visions and dreams in the Bible show a different side of communication with God. They are not always easy to understand. They often use pictures, animals, numbers, and actions that need interpretation. But they carry deep truths. They warn, teach, and reveal what is hidden. Many of them are still studied today, not just by religious people, but also by historians, artists, and writers. They have shaped culture, inspired art, and influenced thinking across centuries. While some may see these visions as old stories or symbols, others see them as proof that there is more to life than what we see. They invite us to look deeper, to be open to meaning, and to listen carefully. Whether we see them as real experiences or spiritual messages, one thing is clear. They make the Bible more than a history book. They make it a book full of mystery, wonder, and imagination.